Alright, so today I'm going to talk about Nintendo's rather unfortunate recent decisions, as well as the broader gaming industry itself. I've been a Nintendo fan since I was 6 years old. Grew up with the NES and the SNES, and once I reached adulthood, I've tended to get Nintendo consoles close to release, but I'm not doing that with the Switch 2. As a matter of fact, it's entirely possible I might not get the Switch 2 at all. I was excited for the Switch 2 until Nintendo announced the prices, more specifically the games and accessories. I mean, the cost of the console itself is one thing because, you buy it once essentially, but $80 for digital copies and $90 for physical copies that aren't really physical copies but are just download codes on game cartridges is far too expensive for me to justify opening up my wallet and buying. It has sucked all the fun out of the announcement for me. It's just a completely ridiculous practice. What's made things much worse is Nintendo has not been honest with us about any of this and has been actively gaslighting us, the fans. Nintendo of America President Doug Bowser, in response to questions of what gamers who can't afford the Switch 2 are supposed to do, just said in no uncertain terms that they can just keep playing the Switch 1. With my significant Switch 1 backlog, I'm probably going to be doing exactly that, at least until price drops are announced, which is far more likely than defenders of Nintendo recognize. Nintendo is claiming that their prices are due to tariffs, but they were announced before any tariffs which may affect them were announced, and now Nintendo is trying to scare customers into buying the Switch 2 by saying that if they don't buy it now, the prices might go up again because of the orange boogeyman in the White House. Their prior projections were that Switch 2 would have a comparable launch to Switch 1, and while a lot of units are being pre ordered, I will admit, the same was also true with the Wii U and 3DS, yet those consoles suffered considerable sales declines following the launch, in part due to prices. In large part due to prices, as a matter of fact. While the 3DS was highly successful eventually, it wasn't until after prices dropped and the variety of games increased exponentially, but the Wii U was a failure in part due to poor marketing, which caused brand confusion. While this is unlikely to be a factor in the Switch 2, the post launch drop I mentioned probably will happen. I would say just give it a year or so, see what happens. Those of you saying that people will buy it anyway are losing sight of the fact that people are broke right now. Even many who aren't broke right now are sick of getting ripped off by companies that treat them like crap. The Wii was one of the most successful consoles of all time because it tapped into the casual gaming, family, and budget markets better than their competitors did, and these recent actions by Nintendo were going to alienate those segments of the customer base. Some people will indeed buy it anyway, but probably not enough to overcome the backlash. The Switch wasn't as cheap as the Wii, but had the novelty of being a hybrid home and semi-portable console and had games that's still affordable to most customers. Nintendo were never perfect saints. They engaged in monopolistic licensing and distribution practices during the lifespan of the NES, for example, and have been one of the most aggressive companies regarding their IPs for many years, with one of the most egregious recent examples being their Pal World LOL suit over game mechanics that bear mild similarity to ones in Pokemon that's they thankfully are so far losing, even though Nintendo has done the same thing with other mechanics with their tower mechanic in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, arguably bearing even more similarity to the Assassin's Creed series tower mechanic. Yet I don't see Ubisoft suing them over it, and this is not a defense of Ubisoft as they are another scummy company, arguably even more scummy than Nintendo, actually, now that I think about it. Nintendo hasn't gone from babyface to heel. It's that they not only doubled down on some of the worst policies they've adopted, some of the worst practices of other gaming companies, as well as recently becoming a trendsetter of bad practices in the gaming industry. Make no mistake, Microsoft's recent price hike announcement was influenced by the Switch 2 price announcements. I'm surprised Sony hasn't made a similar announcement yet, at least not that I could find. It seems like Sony's in wait and see mode, and from a business standpoint, that's seemingly the safest course of action, though I would argue that getting out ahead of it and doing the opposite would probably help them far more. Sony's been more cautious about price increases since the backlash to the massive price of the PS3 during its launch. Nonetheless, I skipped out on the PS5 because, frankly, most of the games on it I could easily get on the PC, and because Sony dove in headfirst into the woke cultism to the point where I'm going to call them Soiny from now on until they reverse course. Even putting the wokeism aside, though, they aren't the picture of ethics either, as in an internet piracy law that could force ISPs to ban people from the internet entirely from committing internet piracy if it passes. Link into the description to that rather disturbing story. Back to Nintendo. Nintendo has rose from the ashes of the '83 gaming crash and did save the industry from fading into irrelevance. Not out of the goodness of their hearts, mind you, but because they saw a business opportunity and seized on it in very clever ways. I and many other gamers am nonetheless grateful for that, but that doesn't give the Big N a free pass from their anti-consumer practices. Nintendo just announced in their latest terms of service, for example, you acknowledge that if you fail to comply with the following restrictions, Nintendo may render the Nintendo account services and or the applicable Nintendo device permanently unusable in whole or in part. What restrictions, you ask? According to Nintendo, you quote can't publish, copy, modify, reverse engineer, lease, rent, decompile, disassemble, distribute, offer for sale, or create derivative works of any portion of Nintendo account services, bypass, modify, decrypt, defeat, tamper with, or otherwise circumvent any of the functions or protections of the Nintendo account services. In other words, even if you aren't engaging in piracy, if you modify your console in any way, if you wanted to overclock it, for example, an AI bot could flag and brick your console. How this is even remotely legal is only because 99.999% of politicians are completely bought and paid for and don't want their gravy train of kickbacks derailed. But that doesn't mean us customers are completely powerless. A gaming crash happened once in '83, as I've alluded to a few times in this video already, and I'm now more convinced than ever before that another one that will make even that one look in the park will inevitably happen. Like I said before, people are broke, so broke that there's a very realistic chance that a second Great Depression will happen in the US, and if it does, it will have a domino effect and will probably spread throughout the entire world just like the last one did, because politicians just can't help themselves. With all the spending, borrowing, money printing, and corruption, and people just keep voting for them anyway. These practices are pissing off gamers to the point where an increasing number are resorting to the same piracy some of these policies are supposed to prevent, or simply not buying their products anymore and just checking out. This isn't just cheapskates that want free stuff. Many pirates argue there are companies that are ethical to pirate from and some that are not, and there are some pirates who pirate games to try them out. Until recent years, piracy was on the decline because companies were getting better because buying the legit product became more convenient than pirating it, but now that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. Nintendo and these other AAA companies are committing seppuku. They are completely divorced from reality, and the coming gaming crash, most of them will probably go bankrupt, and they deserve it. It's a miracle that Atari made it out of the '83 gaming crash, but they're still technically in business now, but they're not what they used to be. If Nintendo survives the coming crash, they could end up being the next Atari, or maybe it could pull a Sega and exit the console race and become a third-party developer. As for EA, Ubisoft, and many other third-party developers, unless they change business practices soon, which I doubt they will, they're probably cooked. In the lead up to the '83 gaming crash, the market was flooded with shovelware. Nearly everyone and their little brother had a new console, and gamers were paying more for less. The E.T. video game, for example, sold so poorly because it was so crappy, easily one of the worst games that was ever made, that there is literally an entire landfill full of unsold copies. Most of that should sound quite familiar to a modern gamer today, as we have woke slop, which oddly enough, current Nintendo of America president and former EA executive Doug Bowser defended for some baffling reason recently. The increased uglification of female video game characters, the release of unfinished games full of bugs becoming normal now, excessive DRM policies, which many of PC gamers can attest can actually make them games run more poorly, prices making my butthole sore just thinking about them, and much more. It is now the worst time to be a gamer since the early '80s. The saving grace in all this is the rise of indie companies, many of which are releasing quality products for far less than the AAA consumers are churning out. Nintendo, to their credit, still makes good games, but the Switch 2 is going to need more than just one or two original releases and a never-ending sea of ports with uncertainty of whether or not the Switch 2 is backwards compatible and to what extent to actually justify actually buying it, even if you put the prices aside. The indie companies are the future. They are they will become the next Nintendo once the dust settles, and the recovery begins in the aftermath of the next gaming crash, whenever that occurs. The sooner it does, the better. Most of these companies, quite frankly, deserve to crash and burn.